Wolverine's new villain is really cool in Marvel Comics right now. This is the Wolverine solo series from Saladin Ahmed, and one of the best things about it is that while he is fighting the villain in the here and now, this is one of those stories where the arrival of this villain doesn't happen all of a sudden. It's actually small little things that happen over the course of the comic that lead to his introduction. So this is Wolverine basically facing off against a material that is sentient known as adamantine, which is stronger than his adamantium. And the way this kicked off was it actually started off in the first issue. So a lot of you guys probably remember during Fall of X, when Marvel got rid of the Krakoa age and all that kind of stuff, Wolverine had a few escapades here and there. Then he took off into the wilderness, which is what he always does. Eventually he's tracked down by someone known as Cyber. Now Cyber has basically adamantium arms, and this leads to a fight between himself and Wolverine. But in the midst of the fight between the two of them, what ends up happening is, because it's quite literally adamantium on adamantium, this ends up waking up a piece of adamantine. Now, something to know here, historically speaking, in Marvel Comics, adamantine was really just the Greek equivalent of Uru metal in Marvel, and that was basically it. It was a way to kind of explain how it was that the mace of Hercules could be every bit as capable as the Uru metal of Thor and the adamantium of Wolverine. Something to be aware of, while Wolverine does have what's called pure adamantium, right, the most perfect form that you could have with adamantium, there are materials out there that he cannot cut through. There's an Infinity comic where he couldn't cut through Thor's hammer, as an example. But the point is that Saladin Ahmed is building on work that's happened in Marvel since like Extreme X-Men, where like there were these small little moments here and there where Marvel would kind of be like, maybe there's something a little more to this adamantine than we originally thought. But this is kind of the biggest development of it, because while Cyber and Wolverine are going back and forth, the adamantine starts to activate, right? Again, it becomes sentient here where it wasn't really sentient before. And so where Cyber is ultimately defeated, he ends up wandering into the cave, and when that happens, the adamantine bonds itself to him. And in doing so, it basically possesses him. And that's kind of how it went over the course of the next few issues. A lot of it were just these small little moments that would happen within the Wolverine comic. For example, in issue number 3, Cyber makes his way to Japan. And actually, he ends up in Kyoto, where Lady Deathstrike is operating. And because Lady Deathstrike possesses adamantium, that the adamantine itself is almost kind of spreading itself like a gospel. All those who have adamantium start to fall under its control. That when Cyber shows up and confronts Lady Deathstrike, he basically touches her, for lack of a better word, and that literally spreads the adamantine into her, which brings her under the control of the adamantine. But then that led into the character of Constrictor. And that was when you started to get a real understanding of what was going on over the course of the story. Constrictor has adamantium tendrils, so he's not really like Omega Red. Omega Red's tendrils are composed of carbonadium, and specifically he can use them to siphon off people's life energy. Constrictor's not really like that, and in fact his whole shtick here was that there was a kind of agreement that was going on, which is to say Wolverine ends up stumbling into this whole situation where someone being transported to a new prison effectively broke free, and that's where you find out that it was Constrictor. It was actually kind of funny the way that it went down. He says like, some nice connected folks sneak messages to me in the joint, offering to spring me during transfer. The truck goes boom, I kill the guards, easy peasy, everything looks great. And then of course, one of you heroes has to show up and ruin it. It's demoralizing, is what it is, right? Why can't I just escape and not have to deal with superheroes happening to be there in the moment when I break out? But then he asked the question, he was like, what are you even doing here anyway? Aren't you supposed to be on an island somewhere? Because again, this happened shortly after the end of Krakoa. And Wolverine's just like, stop talking. And a little bit of a fight does break out. It's not a wholly significant fight. And in fact, Wolverine puts the fear of God in this guy. Like he's literally recoiling in terror because he thinks Wolverine's gonna kill him. And in fact, he actually passes out because of the shock in his fight with Wolverine. This is why I say it's kind of funny. But in the midst of that, Lady Deathstrike shows up. And that's when you realize that what's seemingly going on here is the adamantine isn't simply building a quote-unquote army out of individuals who have adamantium. It's jumping from one person to the next. It's looking for something. And in fact, it doesn't directly go after Wolverine. What ends up happening is Lady Deathstrike grabs Constrictor and transfers the adamantine to Constrictor as well. So now you got 3 folks who are walking around with it. And that's the first time that the adamantine communicates with Wolverine. And it says, "You are deafened by the screeching of the false metal within you. You have not yet heard the call of the adamantine." And Wolverine doesn't really know what's going on, but Deathstrike just says, "It will speak to you if you will only listen." And then she touches him. And that's where he gets this whole kind of ethereal experience where he says, "That voice that isn't Deathstrike's rings in my ears for an impossibly long moment. Then it becomes something else, a cold metallic sound calling to me. It's not mind control or telepathy. It feels older, primal. It feels so ancient, I can hear the passing of ages. I've got good ears. I can always tell where a sound is coming from. And just before I pass out, I realize that ancient primal presence is coming from my own bones." Not only that, they try to spread it to Wolverine. And this is actually a very important moment within the story. But before they can do it, Wendigo shows up, right? Now, for those of you guys who don't know, this is not an overly important moment, but Wendigo is based on a real world mythos. But the point is, Leonard ends up grabbing Wolverine and then taking off before he could be fully infected with the adamantine. And so in the midst of that, Nightcrawler shows up in a Quinja, just because of the fact that previously, at the beginning of issue number 1, Nightcrawler had actually come to seek out Wolverine beforehand and effectively told him, "The mutant population is scattered now since the fall of Krakoa. And the reality is that while you are out here running around in the woods and regaining yourself, and that's great, the truth is the mutant population needs you and the X-Men need you," which is true. Ever since the ending of Krakoa, the X-Men have kind of been scattered to the winds in various ways. It's just kind of given Marvel the ability to tell different stories with different iterations of the X-Men. Some are great, some are terrible. But the fact is, in this moment, Nightcrawler's here to offer aid. And what he tells Wolverine is that in analyzing the energy signature of both Constrictor and Lady Deathstrike, that he picked it up somewhere else as well. So there's a third person running around out there. And once they get to where this energy signature is coming from, what they realize is that it's quite literally a base that's being used to synthesize adamantium. Now that's an important distinction to understand here in Marvel Comics. Historically speaking, adamantium came into existence because of Captain America's shield as it had been created by Myron McClane. But Myron McClane didn't know how to replicate the process of creating Captain America's shield. It was basically the story of penicillin, right? Falling asleep, waking up, realizing, oh my God, this is here. And so he tried to duplicate it. And in doing so, created adamantium. Now that's the historical story. Keep that in the back of your head because Marvel's seemingly changing that. But in the aftermath of that, there's all kinds of efforts to copy adamantium. You've got secondary adamantium, which is incredibly durable, but nowhere near as good as what Wolverine has on his body. You've got carbonadium, which is just the Soviet Union knockoff, but it also has properties of its own. And there's other metals out there, things like antimetal, a form of vibranium that can cut through seemingly any other metal, at least by breaking it down on the atomic level. But the point is that once Wolverine shows up here, he realizes Cyber is now under the control of adamantine. But more so than that, it's almost kind of like a terrorist attack, for lack of a better word, in the sense that no more adamantium is written on a wall in blood. And so it's adamantine basically going after adamantium itself. And that's when you started to pick up on the idea of sentience, right? Starting to realize adamantine has its own motivation and why it's doing what it's doing. Not only that, because Wolverine had previously been touched by adamantine through Lady Deathstrike, now it was able to communicate with him off and on. So in his fight with Cyber, or at least when he's standing in front of Cyber, everything around him kind of vanishes for a moment. And he experiences, quote unquote, the call of the adamantine yet again, right? Where it says, the other screeching wielders of false metal were weak, easily seized, but this one that makes no unnecessary noise is stronger, pure. Perhaps all the true champions have not crumbled into dust. Perhaps this one called Wolverine could serve its purpose, but only after he is broken. Now, this was both a metaphorical and a literal interpretation of the nature of Wolverine within Marvel Comics. On a metaphorical level, yes, Wolverine can be very difficult to break on a psychological level, right? One part of that is due to any number of the mental blocks put in place by people like Jean Grey and so on and so forth that make it very difficult for someone to seize control of his mind. It can be done, but it's very difficult for someone to do that. If you have someone like Zebediah Killgrave, for example, who emits pheromones that allow him to dominate the wills of others, Wolverine's healing factor kicks in. And honestly, it kind of makes him a little bit dizzy, but if it goes on long enough, he can be overtaken. But on a more literal level, Wolverine has the most pure form of adamantium in his body. And so that is what truly draws the adamantine to him. And that's when it started turning into a kind of cat and mouse game, where the adamantine wanted him specifically, and him above all others. But there was somebody else that it went after before it got to him. Not only that, by this point in time, Laura Kinney, X-23, has also joined Wolverine. The reason for it being is that because she has adamantium in her system now, that was added in X-Men issue number 10, that she's been feeling the call of the adamantine as well, which ultimately led her to this location. And then realizing Wolverine's here, the two of them basically team up. And using the energy signatures of Cyber and Lady Deathstrike and so on, they end up at a data center out in Arizona. And when they get there, they find Donald Pierce. Now, Donald Pierce, right, historically one of the Reavers, but also one of the members of the inner circle of the Hellfire Club, basically a guy that scouted out for the mutant population. They realize that he's also infected with adamantine, but it's not really him that they have to worry about, or Cyber, or Lady Deathstrike, or even Constrictor. It's the person who's currently leading them at the moment, a guy by the name of Romulus. Now, historically speaking in Marvel Comics, those of you guys who don't know, Romulus was introduced during Daniel Way's run on Wolverine Origins. For those of you guys who don't know what that was, in the aftermath of House of M, when 98% of the mutant population lost their powers, Wolverine maintained his abilities, but the gift, quote unquote, that he was given by Wanda was that he remembered everything about his past. And this basically allowed a great big huge retcon, where instead of us kind of going with the historical story, which is that Wolverine served on Team X as kind of a CIA Black Ops strike force, that where Wolverine was brought into Weapons Plus, the newest attempt to create super soldiers modeled after Captain America, at least if you follow Grant Morrison's X-Men, that Romulus is like this age-old guy that even Wolverine himself is descended from, and that he was kind of the mastermind behind all. Responses to it were mixed. Right, truth to tell, there's two camps in the Wolverine mythos. Those who follow the idea of Romulus and the fact that he's the one that basically engineered Wolverine's entire life. He was the one behind the Weapons Plus program and Wolverine being bonded to adamantium and all that kind of stuff. And then there's people who just ignore it, just reject it. And I'm really in the second camp, right? I'm one of the people where I'm just kind of like, look, the story of Wolverine is that the US government created Captain America as part of Weapons Plus, right, from Grant Morrison's run. And then Captain America was frozen in ice. So they just started creating more projects, right? Weapons 2 through 10. Wolverine was 10, and he was just one of the unlucky souls that had adamantium bonded to his body because of his healing factor. Done and done. It's a lot simpler. And in fact, the way the story goes here, it looks like Marvel's reverting back to that. Because while Romulus himself is infected with adamantine, it's a little bit different for him. Because unlike Lady Deathstrike, or Cyber, or Constrictor, or Donald Pierce, he's not really an agent of adamantine. He's effectively its champion, and a lot of that's just because of how ruthless and aggressive he is, as well as all the genius tactical strategy that he has from thousands of years of existence. But because of the fact that he cannot overcome Wolverine, the adamantine more or less abandons him. It considers him to be a false champion because he presented himself as the one guy who could destroy Wolverine. And that was kind of the interesting thing. But as far as his role as the champion goes, what differentiated him was the fact that he was able to literally take on a pure adamantine form, which is to say, encasing himself in adamantine. So basically making his entire body indestructible. And in fact, he almost does it. Right, he almost kills Wolverine, and one of the ways that he does this is by drawing the adamantine away from Lady Deathstrike, Cyber, Constrictor, and Donald Pierce, pulling it into himself. The problem with this is that while his body is encased in adamantium, his insides are not. And so quite literally, Wolverine pops his claws and just stabs Romulus in the mouth. And because of the fact that he's in a weakened state and he can be defeated, this tells adamantine that Romulus is not his champion. So it literally leaves him. But that's the cool thing, is because at that point, it starts talking to Wolverine and it says, disappointing. This one was not worthy of our gifts after all. But you, champion, you maybe. And this is when you start to see the retcon that Marvel was making, where it says, many champions have claimed to be one with their weapons, but you are truly united with yours. You are both wielder and weapon, and you cut down our avatar to save what mattered to you. Animal savagery with heroic purpose, false metal with true spirit. You are something new. Is that what this age needs? Tainted heroes made of tainted metal, men who are also weapons. Now that we have reawakened, we must know our purpose in this new world. And to know this world, we must make war in ourselves. And that's when the adamantine takes on this amazing form where he kind of looks like Super Shredder from Ninja Turtles 2. But the funny thing about it is that where Wolverine goes to attack it, it doesn't actually have the intention of destroying him. It wants to learn. And Marvel does this from time to time whenever it comes to new villains or characters being introduced. The Beyonder's a really good example of that, right? You get the original Secret Wars from 1984. The Beyonder makes the heroes and the villains attack each other. Dr. Doom steals the Beyonder's power, and then the Beyonder ultimately gets it back. Secret Wars 2 is when the Beyonder was curious about humanity, and so it came to Earth in order to study the human race as a whole. That's kind of what you're seeing here, right? Adamantine wants to understand why the world works the way that it does. Heroes, villains, the strong versus the weak, the powerful versus the non-powerful. And so when Wolverine attacks it, the adamantine just says, our contest will come soon enough, but not this day. First, we must learn the truths of this new age, what it is to live in it, what it is to kill in it. Then, champion, we will return to finish this. And from that point going forward, the adamantine just kind of vanishes from the X-Men comics for a little while. Instead, it just kind of follows the exploits of Wolverine for a little bit, which are not overly important, but they do provide some context for what we're going to talk about here in a second. Because what ends up going on is Wolverine ends up coming across a couple of mutants who were actually part of a larger camp. Because after the fall of Krakoa, either you joined the various iterations of the X-Men, or with 99% of the mutant population, you just went back into the world and tried to survive as best you could, while keeping yourself safe from any number of government organizations that were trying to track you down, capture you, kill you, or any just human groups that hated mutants, whatever the motivation happened to be. So it's very similar to how mutants functioned before the events of Krakoa. The stories just aren't really told as well, to be honest with you guys. But what you end up finding out is that this camp is under the protection of Silver Sable, probably one of the most capable mercenaries in the world. When it comes to her team, as a quick aside here, when it comes to her team, when you hire Silver Sable to either protect you or to take out a target, she will do it. Like, if you hire her to kill someone, she and her team will kill that person. Now, if you don't pay up, when it comes time to hand over that check, if you try to stiff her on the bill, oh, woe betide your poor soul. Woe betide your soul. Because if you somehow manage to make it out of that whole situation alive, your name is mud, right? Because while Silver Sable does have a lot of enemies within the Marvel Universe, her word is respected universally across the board. So if she comes out and she says, do not do business with that guy, they cannot be trusted, game over. You're never going to be able to hire a mercenary again. That's just the way that it goes with her character. But the reason why I bring all of this together is to simply say that by the time the adamantine returns in Wolverine's comics, he's basically a kind of protector of this mutant encampment alongside Silver Sable, also because the two of them slept together. But that's why he's here among all these mutants. And so with the adamantine itself, it actually ended up joining a kind of fight club, right? Just learning to understand why people fight, how capable people can be, how strong they can be within a limited perspective, right? It's not as though this guy goes out and starts challenging individuals like Juggernaut or something like that. An adamantine-laced Juggernaut would have been pretty dope, albeit cracked within Marvel Comics. It would have been kind of nuts. But that's where the adamantine returns, not in his traditional form, right? Not this Super Shredder looking figure that's out there fighting various people. Initially it happens because Wolverine realizes Romulus is dead, that seemingly Romulus had tried to track him down in order to kill Wolverine so it could prove to the adamantine that he was the true champion. Whether or not Romulus comes back, I don't entirely know, but again, this seems to be Marvel kind of doing away with the Romulus mythos permanently, and it turns out the person who killed him was Hercules. Now, this ties in to the historical nature of adamantine within Marvel Comics, because again, it was presented as the Greek mythological element that explained how it was that Hercules could have a weapon that was comparable to Thor's hammer and to Wolverine's claws. And that's kind of the funny thing, is because with Hercules being possessed now, it's effectively the adamantine talking through him, and Wolverine doesn't realize it right off the bat. But the fight between the two is the stuff of legend. It's one of the greatest fights that I think I've seen Wolverine involved in Marvel Comics, because Hercules just tells him, "Fear not, little wolf, the tyrant who thought himself a champion lies dead, torn asunder by the might of Hercules, who seemingly tore Romulus in half with his bare hands," which is one of the dopest things that I've ever heard of. That's kind of crazy. Now, of course, Silver Sable arrives on the scene at this point, and Wolverine's just like, "Damn, man, it couldn't have happened to a nicer dirtbag." But like, what's going on here, Herc? Like, what's the deal, Hercules? Like, why are you here? Right, I heard that you've been on a peaceful path lately, and I don't really recall you being the murdering type. And he was like, "Oh, but I recall, Wolverine, at last I remember the music of shattered shields, the song of forged metal splitting skulls. I had forgotten such sweet sounds until the adamantine sang to me." And that's when Wolverine realizes Hercules is possessed. And so it's amazing because Hercules starts speaking in like these poetic tones, which he actually did at one point in time in Marvel Comics, right? Silver Sable is like, "There's refugees here, children, right? Whatever's going on between the two of you, this is not the place to have that fight." And Hercules is like, "Before our song of metal then, an overture of broken bone," and just like backhand Silver Sable into a tree. And so at that point, the fight is on, and it's knocked down, drag out. And I would say this is something akin to the way that Wolverine and Sabretooth used to fight back in the 80s. The whole time, Hercules is goading him on, right? "Show mighty Hercules your most savage face. Let the beast in your blood rage forth." He's trying to get Wolverine to lose control, and Wolverine realizes that. Right? That's one of the coolest things about his character in the modern era. I don't like everything about him, but one of the cool things about his character in the modern era is he says, "I need to talk sense into Hercules to stop the fight and get him to see reason. But truth be told, I'm as caught up in the heat of this scrap as he is, and I'm not sure that I can stop fighting." He's kind of driven, right? But the reason why I say this is cool is because while Wolverine in these various conflicts will oftentimes look like he's losing control, not necessarily. When he goes into a berserker rage, yeah, the warrior's madness, no, there's no sense in that guy, right? He's literally in the most bestial state he could be in. But in this moment, he's got total control of his faculties outside of the desire to fight. And so that's when Hercules tells him, "I am thy final test and trial, Wolverine. Are you worthy of facing the adamantine at last, or will you fall at the hands of its new champion? A shame. Thy fury is unmatchable, little wolf, but thy strength is like a child's when compared to the son of Zeus." The problem is something catches him off guard because Wolverine in that moment just loses it, right? Snaps on Hercules and goes and attacks him. And he says, "Be proud, little wolf, you have maimed a demigod," because he slashes him across the face and says, "But such an injury is fitting, for now I look at thee and see only blood," and starts crushing Wolverine in his bare hands, sends him flying into a car. So by this point, the conflict has led into this community, which is a pretty dire situation because again, there's older people, there's women, there's children here, right? And while a lot of the men and women are capable when it comes to fighting, you're talking about a conflict between Wolverine and a god, right? Or a demigod at the very least. This isn't something that you just jump into, and you have to be aware of that. More so than that, because it is Hercules, and because he has a lot of experience with Wolverine, the adamantine knows this. And so in this fight, he says, "You have the keen ears of a beast, but I wonder how well they bear the thunder of the son of Zeus," and just claps his hands and momentarily deafens Wolverine, just enough to distract him. But Wolverine's literally fighting out of desperation at this point. Hercules is crushing this guy, and it's not even close. And so seemingly, the adamantine found its champion, which is fitting considering the historical nature of Hercules and adamantine. But the problem is that when he goes to crack this mace over Wolverine's head, it shatters, it breaks. And this happens because of the fact that when he initially goes to hit Wolverine with the hammer, Wolverine hits it with his claws. And so because of that, it creates a little bit of a fracture. So when it does go over the head of Wolverine, that's when it breaks. And so it looks like the Mace of Hercules is not really adamantine, that it looks like adamantine, but it's not the actual adamantine metal itself. Time will tell, but the point is that in the moment when this mace shatters, the response of Hercules, impossible, right? Like, I am meant to be champion, I alone. And in the midst of this conflict, while the two of them are just laying waste to the town, they freeze. And that is when Athena shows up here. Now, time itself is not frozen. They're simply just held in place. And Athena starts providing some much needed clarity to everything that's going on here, because she tells them, while the two of you are going back and forth about all of this, the adamantine is out there in the world, laying waste to everything it comes across. And with every petty warlord and strongman that it comes across, it's going to imbue them with its own power, to the point that it's basically going to start building an army of heavy hitters, i.e., what happens if Juggernaut is bonded with adamantine? What does that look like? What's also interesting here is that the townsfolk start coming out and yelling at Wolverine, right? Like, why were you having this fight here? You should have led him away. Now, this is one of the things that I don't like about Wolverine in the modern era. If this was Wolverine back in the 80s, understand something. If you see Wolverine in a fight, and that fight goes on for longer than like a couple minutes, he doesn't just immediately gut the guy, then it's not Wolverine's job to lead them away from you. It's your job to leave, right? I mean, the way that Chris Claremont used to write him back in the day, if Wolverine's in the middle of a fight and you linger around to watch it happen, well then, ladies and gentlemen, you pay your money and take your chances. Whatever happens to you, happens to you. That is on your head. But Wolverine is a lot more toned down and a lot more tame than he was back in the 80s. The point is, in the midst of all of this, both Hercules and Wolverine accept the fact that they were literally caught up in the conflict. And that's where Athena provides clarity here. She says, the adamantine is neither a godling nor a simple spirit. It is a concept given form. The very idea of the Earth's metal made alive and aware. It awoke to cleanse the world of man's creation, adamantium, which it calls false metal, but it was given new purpose by its encounter with you, Wolverine. It learned that it could be both weapon and wielder, and it has been killing ever since. And so again, that harkens back to the initial fight between Wolverine and Cyber. And so that's when Wolverine realizes what's going on here. He's responsible for the adamantine emerging and seemingly responsible for the adamantine going on a killing quest. Now, what we don't necessarily know here is why now, right? Why at this point now? Was it simply just because of the fact that Wolverine and Cyber just happened to be in the vicinity of some adamantine, and as they were fighting adamantium on adamantium, at that point it woke up, right? Is it just fate, for lack of a better word, just happened to work out that way, right? We don't necessarily have an answer to that question. And the reality is, I don't really even know if that question is overly important here. The bigger point that Athena makes is that Wolverine is the one person that can defeat adamantine, that nobody else really has the ability to do it. Not Hercules or anybody, because Wolverine has pure adamantium. And so that ends up leading to Athena sending them out to the South China Sea, where adamantine currently resides and is quite literally dominating the Chinese military here. Now, this also seems to be a place where they're trying to develop some version of adamantium, but quite literally, the adamantine's killing everybody that it comes across, but it's also doing it in like the most Shakespearean way ever, which is kind of baller, right? It's like, wither the song of war. This place should be an apogee, a sacred space where this age's deadliest weapons are forged. It should sing to us, but the only music here is the sickly tune of weak, dying men. It's poetic as hell, but dope at the same time. I would say this guy's monologues rival Dr. Doom's, to be quite honest. But when they open fire on him, right, just using guns, whatever they have at their disposal, it says, such meager metal, complaining as it dies. You of this age have wasted our gifts, shaped it into petty little things. We will no longer allow it. And just like starts bringing the buildings down on everybody. But here's the cool thing, is that in that moment, the adamantine stops and looks up and says, hold, that shimmer to this air. At last, a black arrow flies at the golden moon. A shadow crosses the sun. The savage champion comes, and Wolverine and Hercules emerge from these portals and go to confront the adamantine. And it just says, but he brings weakness with him, Hercules, you whom our gifts granted arms in ages past, you who failed as our avatar, has your owl goddess not told you that you stand no chance against us? And Hercules is like, I'm pretty sure I remember her saying something like that, but I don't really care, and like attacks this guy. And it's kind of funny because he talks to Wolverine, right? Wolverine says, careful, the whole damn island's filled to the brim with experimental weapons. You don't want to set any of them off. And Hercules is like, worry not, my small friend, right? Hercules will overcome this foe, and just gets sent flying back into a tank. Right? And it's like, okay, like so much for those efforts. And so at that point, it just comes down to Wolverine and Adamantine fighting one another. And the funny thing about this is Adamantine just overcomes Wolverine every step of the way. It's not even close. If I were to tell you that Wolverine had a fighting chance against this guy, it would be a bold-faced lie. I would be lying my ass off to you, right? He just says, that sound, you taught us this, Savage Champion. You showed us how soothing the killing song is when we sing it ourselves. You gave us the drive for murder. Now in this moment, Hercules just pops back up, grabs the adamantine from behind, and then tells Wolverine, kill him now, right? There's gotta be some kind of a weakness in this guy, but he's composed of pure adamantine, a metal stronger than Wolverine's adamantium. And we know that because when Wolverine jumps back into the fight again and tries to destroy adamantine, he literally goes head first into his armor with his claws and shatters one set of his adamantium claws all the way down to the bone, right? He cannot beat this guy. And so in that moment, the adamantine just grabs Wolverine by the throat and says, and so it ends. Now let the true metal banish the false, and let the screeching song of this tainted era finally fall silent. And literally pops his own claws equivalent to Wolverine's. Yeah, it's amazing. With that being said, guys, we're gonna bring this video to an end. I can't wait to see how this ends. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, drop a like. Thank you all for watching, and I will catch you all later. Peace.